Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of the Magic Sandwich Show, where I'm joined by one of our regulars, Thunderfoot, but also a Magic Sandwich Show virgin. It is the hogtiechamp, who's now just trying to turn his camera on.
I
Nothing
got the
like
camera going. It's the lights that's the problem. There we go.
you're coming from Canada in darkness.
Darkness.
That's a long way, long way north in Canada, especially this time of year.
I'm not sure how many people are familiar with hogtiechamp. I had the pleasure of meeting him in person, so to speak, the first time last night on a different show, and I was so impressed. I insisted that he came on this show, and I'm sure that he will not disappoint. Hogtie, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's fun being here already.
Well, you've seen behind the scenes as to just how well organised this show is. Perhaps I should begin with a few apologies. We were about 35 minutes late starting last week, and that's because we were without Tony. I'm not sure, Tony's never explained where he was, but he was not able to make it. And it just shows how useless we are without him. But fortunately, he's back, bringing the show to you in all its fine quality and glory. A date to put in your diaries, by the way, September the 14th and 15th. There will be another 24-hour show in support of the charity Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières. More details for that will follow on my YouTube channel and also on the Magic Sandwich Show website, www.magicsandwichshow.com, where normally you will get information about forthcoming events. You can also follow us on Twitter at the DPRJones, and we've got a Facebook channel as well, a Facebook account, which I think is under the same name. Details will be in the description on YouTube videos. Again, this is a call-in show, and if you would like to join us, simply send a Skype contact request to Magic Sandwich Show, all one word. Include in that, please, the gist of the topic or question you'd like to ask. Otherwise, I'm afraid, simply going to get ignored. And I've got 3 contact requests at the moment. All of them have not included any information. It's simple contact request. I'm sorry. If you want to appear on the show, do include that information, and we will get you on. There are no set topics for this evening. We're going to have a general chat about a couple of things, and we'll be playing a video to you shortly, which I think you might enjoy. But we're going to kick off with a topic which I meant to raise on the last show because I put it in the promotional material, namely, what happens if you fire a gun in an aeroplane? And I included a clip in the webpage of that wonderful scene from the James Bond film where Sean Connery as James Bond has a fight with Goldfinger, and a gun is fired, a window explodes, and Goldfinger is sucked through this window. And I thought this is a bit odd. As I was flying back from America most recently, I was told if there was depressurization in the cabin, an oxygen mask would fall down. And I thought, well, hang on, why is that? I should be flying out of a window like Goldfinger. So we're going to start with Thunderfoot's physical explanation of what happens if you fire a gun in an aeroplane. Thunderfoot.
Of course, it all depends on the size of the hole. If you were to just get a drill a hole in the side of the airplane, then, there would be a sort of hissing sound, but that's about it. You can never get enough air through a hole that size, and you could quite easily just stop it up by putting your finger over the hole. If you like, there is only, even if you were to go into space, which is where you would have the greatest pressure differential between what's inside the plane and what's outside. So it would be, say, 1 atmosphere of pressure inside the plane and 0 atmospheres outside. That's the biggest pressure differential you can get. You could just put your finger over the hole, and it would sort of make all your capillaries in your finger sort of rupture and such like. But your skin's fairly robust to that. So if you were to blow out a window, the amount of air that you can put through something that size is considerably more formidable. So if you were to get sort of sucked half, I think in Goldfinger, the guy gets sucked through.
He gets sucked through a window.
Yeah. Probably not. You could quite easily sort of calculate the pressure that's actually pushing on him from one side, and I don't think that would be enough to suck you out. Not if you're a fat. Yeah,
if the doorway were open, would you be able to hold yourself in place?
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Sorry,
Because
let's say that. So if the door suddenly came away,
you go straight out with the air, because when you get a large opening like that, basically all of the air in the plane will leave within probably a second or two. So there's been Aliens where they open the outer door and it's a huge doorway. At that sort of level, there would just be this little whoop sound. And again, you could sort of calculate it, how much momentum, what's the mass of air in the sort of spaceship or whatever, and all of that leaves within, a second or a couple of seconds, or most of it leaves in a couple of seconds. You can work out the sort of forces that's likely to put on you. So if you're standing by a big thing like a door, my guess would be is that all of the air, imagine this is the plane, and you're stood by the doorway, all of the mass of the air in that plane, which will be, several kilos, is going to move through that doorway in a couple of seconds. And there's just no way you can sort of stand up you would just get sort of blown out.
if you are not near the door, you've got a good chance, though.
If you're not near the door, you probably all you'd notice is all the air's gone all of a sudden.
And then something will drop down and it will...
There was a case very much like this in Hawaii. They had all these planes that used to do the island hopping in Hawaii. And they weren't taking the salt, the sea spray into effect. And so it had weakened some of the paneling or something, and the regular checks hadn't picked this up. And there's this very famous piece of footage where, the whole plane fuselage is there, apart from one bit that's just been ripped off. So it's basically a huge chunk of the fuselage missing. And you'd have thought, well, at that, all these people are going to get sucked out. And it turns out that virtually everyone was sat down wearing seatbelts. And so when this huge chunk of the fuselage just ripped off the top, there was only, I think, one stewardess who was actually sucked out, and they think she was actually involved with the structural failure. So the whole way that planes are made up is they're designed for, I think they call it controlled failure. So if you like, there's an airframe, and then there's panels just sort of, I don't know whether they're bolted or welded on the outside, but they're designed such that if one panel fails, the one next to it doesn't fail also, right? So if you actually sort of shoot a hole in the plane, you just blow out about a foot square section. That's it. And that it doesn't systematically doesn't propagate through the plane, doesn't destroy the plane, because you've got controlled failure. And they have the similar thing with the engines. The engines are designed to fall off before they break the wing off. But anyway, what they reckon happened is one of these tiles failed, and they actually sucked the stewardess out, right? The stewardess who was actually about there at the time. And it was her actually, because she had momentum when she hit the hole, that's what actually caused this much larger structural failure. Because if you like, she weighs 100 kilos. Yeah, people weigh about 100 kilos, give or take. And you get this effect called momentum hammer or something. It's basically, when you have a bath and you put your foot over the plug hole, and it sort of go dong, 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 yeah? You know what I'm talking about?
Kind of.
Yeah,
I don't want to make too many embarrassing admissions, but yes.
We're talking about dongs and holes. But yes. As the pressure pushes against the body, it tends to plug the hole, and then that lets the person drop back down, but then now there's pressure again, and it bang, bang, and that's say she struck several times.
Well, I mean, I think the reckoning is that previously you just have the air rushing through the hole. But when you actually get the person going up with momentum as well, there's all of the air that's moving towards, right? So when the failure starts, all of the air starts moving. So there's momentum in this. There's momentum in the girl. And when she hits the hole, all of that momentum sort of stops in an instant. And that's basically what causes the larger rupture. Well, that's what they think happened. And there's this very famous piece of footage of this plane landing, this huge section of the fuselage missing, and all these people, they just sat there in this plane, in their seats, and you know, there's the whole top of the plane's missing on both sides.
But you know why? Because it was a Qantas plane, and Qantas never crashes. I learnt that from Rain Man. Now,
oh, really?
People who were around in the 80s will know what I'm talking about. But, Thunder, okay, I accept what you're saying, but tell me why I'm terrified, and maybe have I been listening to too many urban myths? When I go to the toilet in an aeroplane and I flush it, that sounds quite horrific. I mean, you can really sort of like feel as if something is being sucked out. And the urban myth that I heard, I kid you not, you might laugh, but I heard it and I believe it every time I go to the toilet on a plane, is that somebody was somewhat overweight and managed to create an air seal around the toilet, and she did a flush and go. Obviously she was there for a while and she kept on flushing, and when it sort of like flushed, it drew out her entrails.
I don't know. I mean, it's certainly possible, because all of these things basically go on whatever pressure, and the force that you actually have holding you down would be the surface area, which in this case is quite large, and the pressure differential. So, you know, if you were to have your arse stuck in a seal where it's essentially vacuum on one side and 1 atmosphere pressure on the other, I would say there's very, very little chance of you being able to get off the toilet, right?
Well, apparently people in the chat are saying that Mythbusters busted that. So someone, whoever posted that, please tell us what was the result. Hogtie, did you want to comment on the aeroplanes before we move on to?
Well, I was just going to make the point about, as Thunderfoot was saying, a small hole isn't a problem, and obviously it's when there's a big hole, when the cross-sectional area of that hole is big enough that there's significant force applied over that area. It's going to push you out, and you wouldn't be able to hold yourself in. The thing that's interesting about the movie, the Goldfinger movie, was that it wasn't just that the guy went into the hole and then sort of plugged it, but the hole's this big around, and it extruded this big fat man. It just pushed him through like toothpaste through a tube, and it's just, you know, the worst that would have happened was he would have boom up against the window, and then that would have been the end of it. But I had a physics professor that, just as an interesting challenge, would say, calculate what that pressure difference would have to be to actually push somebody through the window. And of course, you can't achieve it, as Thunderfoot says, you can't achieve it by going into space, because the 1 atmosphere of pressure in the plane isn't enough different from the 0 atmospheres of pressure outside. That it would actually have to be, you know, 20 or 30 or 50 atmospheres of pressure. The plane would have to be just super pressurized before you'd have the effect of actually pushing somebody outside the plane.
Now, if that doesn't entice people to call us, I don't know what will. We will discuss issues of religion and science and pretty much anything you like. Send a contact request to no, that's the website. Contact request to Magic Sandwich Show on Skype, and we'll see if we can get you on. But we are going to take a shift in topics now, and hopefully Tony behind the scenes is going to be kind enough to play us a video which was posted by the James Randi Education Foundation only a couple of days ago, and then we will discuss that. Tony, over to you.
Well, Sylvia Browne, the unsinkable Sylvia Browne, is foundering in the water. I think her ship is going under, and I couldn't have seen a better shipwreck in all of my long career. as an investigator of so-called paranormal, occult, and supernatural claims. Sylvia Browne, I've been after for 20 years now. We used to have a little thing up on our Swift blog. We used to have a little thing up there, a little clock, showing how many years since Sylvia Browne had promised on the Larry King Show that she would do tests, definitive tests of her ability to talk to the dead.
Are you willing to take his test?
Yeah, whatever test it is.
But you'd be willing to do that, right?
Yes, I would be willing to do that.
Or asking for guesses to the
I don't want to even know the gender. I just want to know the name.
Okay, fine. That's fine. That's your choice.
I'll make it even easier for you.
Okay.
Sylvia has agreed to your conditions.
Yes.
You and Sylvia will set this up. We'll use a website. We'll use my website. Sylvia Browne will take Randy up on the challenge. We'll let you know about the date and time and everything.
So, as I say, for 20 years now, I've been after Sylvia, and it looks as if she's rather getting her comeuppance right now. Amanda Berry is a name that you'll be familiar with, and that she certainly was familiar with, because during a session on the Montel Williams show years ago, remember him? He used to have Integrity at one time, I believe, but that's quite a while ago. He sort of adopted Sylvia Browne, and he had her on his program regularly, once a week at least. The parents of Amanda Berry appeared on the Montel Williams show, and they were told by Sylvia, "Oh, I'm very sorry, but your daughter is dead." Sylvia said that she had been murdered.
Almost 9 years ago, Amanda Berry's mom went on the Montel Williams show, where resident psychic Sylvia Browne spoke of Amanda.
I don't think I'll ever see her again. Yeah, in heaven, on the other side.
The WMMS morning show in Cleveland reenacted the transcript. The host read the part of the psychic.
I hate this when they're in water. She's not alive, honey.
Well, as most of us know, and I'm sure Sylvia is now aware, just recently, in that dreadful episode that American history will have a hard time living down, where 3 girls were found in this man's home, this man named Castro. Amanda Berry was one of them, alive and well. Her mother had died some years before that, in something like 2006, I think it was. Amanda Berry and the other 2 girls had been imprisoned at this man's home for almost 10 years, incommunicado, not in touch with the outside world at all. And Sylvia Browne had told that grieving mother, broke her down completely, that her daughter had been killed. Sylvia Browne is a monster. She invents things off the top of her head, very carelessly and callously. She doesn't care what effect her pronunciations have on the people that she's supposed to be serving. She gets now $800 for a 20-minute talk over the telephone with the fabulous Sylvia. Now, the James Randi Educational Foundation and myself, James Randi, have been after this woman, as I say, for over 20 years. And why hasn't somebody done something about it? Well, now Anderson Cooper has joined our ranks in that he has come out against Sylvia. He says she just has no integrity whatsoever, and that's absolutely true.
Strange enough, there are 2 jagged boulders which look really misplaced because everything is trees, and then all of a sudden you've got these stupid boulders sitting there.
And he could be found near
He's near the boulders. Is he still with us?
Well, that was famous alleged psychic Sylvia Browne on the Montel Williams show in 2003, 4 months after Sean Hornbeck disappeared. She said that Sean Hornbeck was dead. She was wrong about that. She said a Hispanic man with dreadlocks had taken him. She was wrong. And she told Sean's grieving parents where to search for his body. She, of course, was wrong about that as well. As you know, Sean was found alive, not stuck between jagged boulders, but in an apartment in suburban St. Louis.
She's a comic figure if you're not a believer in the supernatural. But Sylvia Browne needs to be put out of business permanently. I think that can happen. And I look forward to that day. This is James Randi.
A tragic affair in all respects. The only thing that James Randi got wrong in that piece was, I checked this on her website as a result of seeing that video. Sylvia Browne actually charges $850 for a telephone reading, whatever, that will last between 20 and 30 minutes. So she can earn $2,500 an hour spreading this poison. Hogtie, what are your views on it, and what's the solution?
I wonder how much debate we're going to get on this topic. This really needs someone to call in and defend Sylvia Browne so we can. I mean, it's a frightening thing. Yesterday when we were on the Lion Ghost show and this question had come in from Shock's room about sort of, well, why do you guys speak out against Christianity or theism? And I was making the point, it's not so much speaking out against these things, it's speaking in favor of a rational approach to evaluating what's true and what's not. And because this notion that we have that it's okay if somebody has a belief that's mistaken, as long as it's something to do with, fairies or, leprechauns or just whatever, as long as it's, no big deal. But these are, people who were misguided in this way, sort of put themselves in a position where they can be victimized. And I wish that was a situation we could address. But I think the thing that really raises people's ire is that it's not just that these people are misguided and they make these mistakes in judgment and they give this woman money. And by the way, I should mention she and her business manager repeatedly make the claim that they don't charge the people in missing persons cases, and that's not true. Anderson Cooper just did an expose on this. She absolutely does charge that fee. But sort of more frustrating than these people being easily deceived is the fact that there's somebody out there who sees this as a practical business opportunity. And I'm just watching some of these comments go by in the text chat, and people are absolutely right. She's a disgusting person who will say the most awful, heinous things, just really rip people to the core for $800. It's crazy, $850.
Do you think there is any bending over backwards to try and understand it? Do you think there is any chance whatsoever that she actually believes in what she is doing? That is to say, that she believes it. She does have these powers.
Yes, I do. And this is something, this is an issue that in debating some of these topics in chat rooms and on YouTube and whatnot, that I think I sometimes get into disagreements with people that I think as sort of skeptics and rational thinkers, we tend to look at a set of facts and look at a situation and say, what? Nobody could come to that conclusion. Nobody would believe this. So obviously that person's lying. And I don't know. I tend to take the position that it's amazing what a mind can convince itself of, what a person can convince themselves, how they can hold on to beliefs that are contrary to all the facts around them, because it just becomes part of their psychological structure to be that way. And I think Sylvia Browne holds the following beliefs: that she has a special connection to the spirit world. She thinks her spirit guide Francine is a real person, or a real spirit at the very least. And she thinks God is real and God has given her this connection. And most importantly, she believes that what she is doing is consistent with the general theme of being a good person. She sees herself as helpful and caring and considerate, and is baffled by the claims that she's not a good person.
I struggle with that, I have to say, and I'll come to you in a second, Thunder, if I may, but I tar her with the same brush as the likes of Peter Popoff, and you would never be able to convince me that Peter Popoff did not know that what he was doing was being dishonest. I mean, I may be wrong, but I struggle to think or believe that she actually believes that she has these powers. I mean, she's been proved wrong so many times. One of the clips that was not shown in that Randi video was the incident, again, on the Montel show, where she told a grieving wife that her husband had drowned. And this was someone who's a fireman in 9/11, who had died in the 9/11 tragedy.
Yeah, and then I think someone's going to mention Sean Hornbeck was another fairly famous gaffe on her part. And I think those three are the sort of the famous ones, or well, now it's the three famous ones. But you take a look at Anderson Cooper, some of the exposés he's been doing. There's a long history of this stuff, to where she makes an explicit statement about somebody's state, they're alive or they're dead, or they're, quite often she says, oh, they're in water, they're dead, they're not going to find the body. Wow, okay. So there's several more than just those three. Plus, there's a whole host of misrepresentation about the nature of the business. So she tells people that the FBI regularly consults with her, and that she's, the term she uses for them, she says thousands and thousands of cases of missing persons that she's worked with the FBI and helped the FBI solve. And there's just not a trace of evidence for that case. That being the case,
doesn't this sort of like detract from your argument that she actually thinks she's genuine? If she's spreading such disinformation about previous cases, then this shows a pattern of dishonesty, doesn't it?
I think it does, but I think that, I mean, the notion, how do I put this? I think that those of us who've thought through what it means to be truthful and to be honest and what is truth and things like that, we sort of put more rigidity to our definition about what it means to be honest. And other people, honesty is a lot more of a fluid concept. You touched on Peter Popoff, and let me ask you this, DPR, like, okay, I'm assuming that part of the reason why you say that Peter Popoff knows he's a scam artist is because he was caught using technology, right? Sylvia Browne closes her eyes and mumbles and then thinks she's talking to her spirit guide Francine, and well, maybe she thinks she is. But Peter Popoff went out and bought radio equipment, right? And he's got the receiver in his ear, and he tells his wife, okay, now you go here and you take these cards and you do this. So there's a clear demonstrable conspiracy involving technology. So I would concede the point that he knows he's full of crap when it comes to the, oh, hey, you're from 123 Oakland Street, you know, that's obviously garbage. But DPR, would you put forward the point that Peter Popoff does not believe in God and does not believe in the healing power of God and salvation through Christ, but merely identifies those beliefs as being an opportunity to make some money from people?
I have absolutely no doubt in my mind, although if you ask me to justify this, I would struggle to do so. I have no doubt in my mind that he does not believe in God. I think Sylvia Browne's more difficult case. I mean, if you look at her website, and again, I'll include links to her website where you can see for yourself that, you know, $850 is the going rate. In that website, on the very same page, she makes consistent references to the fact that she has God-given powers, and the powers that she has are given to her by God. She's making that claim. I simply don't know, because you're asking me to try and understand the mind of somebody who is so totally different to myself and so alien, that I find it very difficult to believe. But I'm approaching it obviously from my subjective opinions and beliefs. I struggle to believe it. Thunder, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's fairly clear there are two categories, or two general categories with fuzzy edges, and that's those who actually genuinely believe this. They're sort of self-deluded, as it were. Those who actually have believed their own hype, or just genuinely believe that they have these powers. And then there are those who are essentially just scam artists. And I forget who it was I was watching, but they were saying that they had this great admiration for Harry Houdini. Not because he was a magician, because if you like the magicians, they spend their lives trying to actually trick people. So they're also very good at sort of sniffing out when people are trying to trick them. And Houdini used to do all of these very simple things, like they would have the seance, they'd turn all the lights out, and then there'd be this sort of moving the air and rustling sounds moving around, and he would just do something simple like light up a match, and all of a sudden you can see the other people in the room sort of wafting people with pieces of card, and there's the mystic holding the long stick with this sort of tambourine type thing on the end. And, the whole thing is just blown wide open. Yeah, these people are not self-deluded. They have, if you like, taken the conscious step to, if you like, do what Popov did, which is to actually buy the electrical kit and go out and use it to scam people, or to buy, their tambourines and to use it to scam people. And obviously there is some sort of potential for overlap between the two, that people might believe that they have some power. It's just that they hype them a little more, which they convince themselves is not actually a big deal. As for which one Sylvia Browne goes into, I struggle. If she says that she's helped the FBI solve hundreds of cases, things like this which are just demonstrably false, or it's difficult to see that even the most wishful interpretation of reality could allow you to make a claim like that. I think this is on the deceitful end of things.
I mean, if it were the case that she made it abundantly clear that her readings, predictions, pronouncements were subject to an liability of error, gave an idea of what that error may be, gave apologies to people who she had traumatized by her pronouncements, then I might be persuaded that she has some degree of integrity. As far as I'm aware, she has not done any of that, nor will she.
Well, just like God can be mysterious, so can spirit guides.
But this is my point. Why doesn't she say that? If she say I'm being guided by the hand of God, and his message, or I'm sure his message is clear, but my ability to interpret his message isn't always 100% accurate. Fine.
Well,
you look on her website. You look on her website and try and find any indication that she has ever been wrong, or that she may be wrong in any reading that she gives. It's not there. I'm sorry. This is why I struggle to.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but in all fairness, that this is the closest she's come. Was the statement that went up a couple days ago that says, "I have been more." This is in reference to Amanda Berry still being alive. She says, "I've been more right than wrong," and with the caveat that only God is right all of the time. That's the closest she's come to sort of saying, "Look, I'm not perfect, and I never say my predictions are perfect. Only God is right all of the time."
But this is the thing. Even if she were to put on the disclaimer like you want DPR, I think it would make very little difference, because just like there are mystics who are sort of self-deluded and those who are sort of con artists, if you like the market, there are people who want to believe it. Right? There are people who want to give her the benefit of the doubt. If you like, this is sort of a version of Pascal's wager, that, if you've lost your daughter, and you're willing to grasp at any straws under those circumstances. Well, what if there's only a 1 in 1,000 chance that it's correct?
No, I don't see it that way.
And I don't take it.
I don't see it that way. I see it this way. There are people who are in need of comfort, and she's exploiting that.
Right. But like you're right. These people are desperate. They are willing to go outside of the envelope to try anything. But if she was one of the sort of self-deluded psychics, who said that I can be wrong. The spirits can sometimes be mysterious. There is her who wants to believe she has powers, and there are, if you like, people who want to believe she has powers. So there is, if you like, an overlap here of wishful thinking, right? And I agree that there's all of these people who, they understand that people who are desperate will hand over large sums of money, even in a slim hope that you can offer them something. And you're right, they're just essentially exploiting people when they're at their most vulnerable, and that's despicable.
Yes. Hogtie, did you want
DPR,
to
yeah, I was wondering, did you make mention of the fact that Luana Miller passed away in 2003, 2004, whenever it was?
I certainly didn't. The name doesn't ring a bell with me. Tell us about it.
Oh, that was in the video clip that, or actually maybe it was in the video. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just retreading it here. That was the mother. She had written some stuff and was interviewed a number of times, and Amanda Berry's mother really had become quite despondent after this had happened. And I think this is really the most heinous thing about it. And you don't want to say that, sort of overstating it to say that Sylvia Browne, you know, killed Luana Miller, but just the level of misery that she brought to this woman, I mean, clearly it did shorten her life. And I wonder, you know, what are the consequences now? So she went to the grave not knowing her daughter was still alive. But
well,
but
in Sylvia
Browne?
In Sylvia's mind, everything's all right anyway because they'll be meeting in heaven. And I'm not being trite about that. But what I was going to go on to the legal aspect because towards the end of the video, you'll recall that Randy said that this woman should be stopped, and he hopes it will happen soon. It's interesting. The very first contact I had with Randy and the JREF was when I started doing videos about Peter Popoff, and I contacted the JREF and asked them why it was that Popoff was getting away with this after having been exposed so publicly by Randy back in, I think, the late 80s. And the response I got back, I can't remember if it was from James or JREF, it doesn't matter, but the gist of the message was, when it comes to issues of religion, no lawyer in America will touch it. And that, I think, is deeply disturbing. So I don't know what he has in mind at the moment, and I don't know. I'm not sufficiently noused up on laws in America, but I don't see that there are not already in place laws in America that could stop this sort of thing. It's just there is not the will to do it. Hopefully, Sylvia Browne will carry on destroying people's lives, and they may actually take legal action against her, and that may be the thing that will bring her to an end. Thunder.
What you were saying about there's not a lawyer who will touch it if religion is involved, I don't believe that for a second.
That's not what I said. That's what I was told by the JREF. And
there's got to be more to it than that, yeah. Because for the simple reason, there are atheist lawyers who would be only too happy to sort of take up on this sort of thing. You know, just look at the Dover versus Kitzmiller thing. Right? There's got to be something else in that equation. But as for Sylvia Browne, what would you sue her for?
Well, as I said, I'm not noused up enough in American law to know exactly what you could, but I'm pretty certain that if you tried to do that in this country, there'd be some laws that would probably be able to stop her doing so.
No. You can sell homeopathic medicine over the counter in England.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing.
It's an interesting issue, and I know that I began looking into it at some point. That would probably fall within trade restrictions, and I think that homeopathic medicine, when it's sold in this country, is sold with very, very vague claims about it. So vague that it doesn't actually breach any laws. Hogtie, I sense you're desperate to butt in. Am I wrong?
Well, I was more interested in your opinion on the legal issue. I mean, I appreciate you stepping back and saying, well, you know, I'm not an expert in American law, but I mean, all three of our countries have its foundation in common law. I mean, the British law kind of where the laws of the old empire was kind of where this all came from. Is there not something from tort law? And I guess on the other side of it, is there a way that we could even present a defense for it? Like one of the people in the text chat here had asked, well, you know, why is she still allowed to do this? Why is she in business? Is there a fundamental freedom argument to be saying that she should be allowed? Because she's not selling pills. She's selling information. She's communicating with people. You know,
As I say, I'll agree with you in this regard. I think the Canadian legal system is very similar to ours. I don't think it's the same as the American system. I think there are significant differences. Secondly, I would repeat the fact that I don't know enough about American law. to make a determination on whether she's committing an offence or not, or whether she could be sued. I suspect she probably could be, but it is no more than that, and I'm not going to stick my neck out any further than that.
Understood. I guess, how many lawyers do you know that if she was being sued, do you think would kind of step up and defend her right to engage in this type of commerce?
I'm sure she's got deep pockets. I'm sure a lot of lawyers would be more than happy to represent her, and I think that she probably already has
I bet,
a number of lawyers on retainers to ensure, for a number of reasons. You know, she's not stupid. She's going to be aware that she could be violating certain laws, so I'm sure she has a body of lawyers who check every single statement and every single advertisement and claim that she makes to ensure that she avoids prosecution or civil action.
I remember we discussed this previously. Popoff's wording on his magical miracle water is basically it rings of evading legal exposure.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, I don't even know that we should be in favor of a sort of a nanny state approach where the government's going to come in and help protect us against this sort of misinformation. I mean, at this point, I kind of wish that they would sort of recognize this as a form of fraud, and what Popoff does is a variant of fraud. But having said that, I think that what would be better for everybody is if there was a way that, like, she could be exposed for the snake oil salesman. And what do they used to do in the Old West was run them out on a rail or tar and feather them. And what's going to happen next for Sylvia Browne? I mean, she has a speaking engagement next month. The place in Virginia is 500 seats at $99 a seat. Like, you know, people are still going to fill the seats.
I think the argument about the balance between allowing people to speak and hold these views and controlling them is an interesting one. I have to say that it's not one that I find particularly persuasive. If instead of selling readings, she was selling used cars and said, oh yeah, this car is absolutely wonderful, and you get in it and the first corner you take, the wheels fall off and you get paralyzed, whatever. I don't think you would turn around and say, oh yeah, well, she had the freedom to make whatever claims she wanted to. It really isn't an argument that holds much weight in my view.
True enough. I wonder whether or not, I mean, I'm interested to see how the JREF's going to handle it, whether or not there are going to be other video makers that are going to address it. I know I'm very impressed by that moment on the video clip, like where she tells people, like, oh, I hate this when they're in water, and she's not alive, honey. And the cut to the parent's face, just showing that desperation, that sinking feeling. And I really hope that those images get put out there, because it's not at all harmless.
But if you would follow that same line of reasoning, is telling kids that, you know, if they displease God, then they will burn forever in eternity. Is that not also evil?
I think so.
Should parents be restricted from teaching their children such things?
Is that a yes or no question? That's one of those things. I think the world.
Well, no. My point more generally is this: there are situations in which the law does infringe upon family life. If the parents beat their children, society doesn't, law doesn't accept it. Law will step in. So really, what we're talking about now is not whether parents have a completely free rein on what they do with their children. It is where we draw the line. Once you accept that, it's a discussion about whether indoctrination. I mean, there are severe sorts of indoctrination that I suspect you would feel comfortable with the state intervening. If you were aware of a parent who was indoctrinating their child to become a suicide bomber, I think you would have no hesitation in saying, yes, that's wrong. The state ought to step in. Yeah?
I certainly think so, but I even put that line further back. Like if I could, there's a family in, I'm going to say Manitoba, I could be wrong about that. It's Central Eastern Canada. But they had their kids taken away because the mother was painting swastikas and all sorts of sort of offensive epithets on her kids, and raising them to be bigots and racists. And this is a crazy group of people. They consider themselves part of the modern Aryan nation. And the provincial government took their kids from them because she'd send them to school with swastikas on them. It was unbelievable. And yet somehow it escapes the government's attention if you tell your kids that gay people are sinful and bound for hell, because that's part of the freedom of freedom of conscience and freedom of religious expression. So I think we've drawn a line in a rather odd place, even at that.
Yeah. Should we take our first caller? I think we shall.
Is it Sylvia Browne?
I wish it were. I actually thought about setting up a chip in to see if we could get enough donations so I could have a 20-minute call with her. But
I was about to say she would be really psychic then.
I think she would hang up very quickly.
Someone is calling me online. I can sense it. My spirits have told me that.
I think Integralmath has been with us before. I'm not sure, but certainly, hopefully, we're going to be joined by Integralmath, and it's going to be a slight change in topics, I fancy. Integral, are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay.
What have you got for us today?
Well, I made a video after the last Magic Sandwich show, and Thunderfoot left me a message inviting me to call in this week. So here I am.
I'm not sure we all need to know about your private communications behind the scenes, but let's
well,
carry on.
He didn't actually specify which show that he does I'm supposed to call in on, so it could be the weekend one he does with the other people.
Oh,
but
traitor.
Yes. So can you hear me? Everyone else?
Yeah.
You're everyone else now. Do you hear? Thanks. Okay. Yeah. So Thunderfoot thinks that I don't want to speak for him, but what I got from what he left on my channel is that I strawmanned him, and that I strawmanned him, and he took exception to it. So I thought we could discuss that. Any inconsistency so far in what I've said, Thunderfoot?
I think it would be more productive if you actually just make the argument that you want to make, and we'll respond to it. Otherwise, we get into the he said, she said, and no one who's watching will know any of the background to this. So,
which is precisely why I asked you if I've misrepresented anything thus far.
No one needs the baggage that goes with this. Just make the point.
Apparently it's a complex question to answer. At any rate, or in any event, on the last show you were talking about gun control, and you said something, I don't want to misrepresent you here, but something to the effect of that Americans have a concept that the removal of guns is the lead-in or the prelude to a dictatorship. And I responded to that particular point. And more specifically, you said that it has not happened in England and it has not happened in Europe. I pointed out Charles II, a case I chose on purpose, and Germany with respect to the Jews. And you said that all I had was one 300-year-old example and an unstable country, namely that of Germany. And moreover, you talked with other people about other things. So, any problems so far in the way I've painted the conversation, or is that a question that you want to answer?
Let's just actually stick to the actual points. We're not worried about previous conversations, whatever. Right, so the problems here are that what you have in England at the moment is we tighten up the gun laws, and do you think that this is the prelude to dictatorship in England?
Whether I happen to think that one example is or is not that is not...
Just
I am answering the question.
Unlike
you, I will answer the question put to me. Because there's something here like an undistributed middle. As I said in my video, you can point to a lot of examples where it doesn't happen. It says all of nothing, particularly when you said that it has not happened in Europe and it has not happened in England. I found one example in Europe generally and one example particularly in England. Therefore, the fact you point to one example where it didn't happen says nothing whatever about the times when it did.
Right. So, and the pattern that you say is here is that when they take your guns off you, this is to pull you to dictatorship, which is equally bollocks.
Well, I didn't make that point.
Yes, you did.
No.
Yes, that's the first point you made when you actually started this call.
Are we in the same conversation? Does anyone else recall my having said that it is, in fact, necessarily a prelude to it?
Integral, it may be helpful because I'm slightly lost here.
Okay.
Let's just clarify. Leave aside what's exchanged between you before. What issue are we talking about?
Well, in particular, the last show where, well, there were a couple other things that were at issue, but relevant here.
Let's deal with one at a time.
Yes, relevant here is when Thunderfoot had mentioned that one of the fears of Americans is that it is the case that the gun laws that restrict or deprive people of their firearms is the lead and event or the prelude to dictatorship. Now, that can well be some Americans' fear, but he went further and said, which has not happened in Europe and has not happened in England, which even if that were the case, that wouldn't be particularly relevant because, as I pointed out in my video, we have examples here in the United States where such things have come about. But he stuck with what he said. I didn't say it for him.
Maybe we ought to actually, rather than trying to find essentially arguing over points of pedantry. There we go. What we're really after is the pattern genuine that they take your guns off you, then you get a dictatorship?
Sometimes
right?
yes,
Because
sometimes no.
Right. Okay. So we're basically in agreement then. Now the next question.
Okay.
Do you think that I'm going to use England as the example, where they tighten up the gun laws, that this is actually going to enhance or to reduce the chance of a revolution in England, or not a revolution, of a dictatorship in England?
Well, I don't know. I don't have special glasses to predict the future.
Okay. Okay. So you can make no predictions about the future because you don't have special glasses, right? The whole idea is you want to establish what are real patterns and what are not real patterns, and you have to do this on a diminished data set because you're right, you don't know everything. But what do you think?
Well, about whether or not one will in fact happen in England, a dictatorship of some
and that the tightening up of the gun laws will be a significant factor in this.
Well, if it should be the case that one does come about, one thing is certain: the inability of the people to resist with an amount of force sufficient to be able to mount any kind of resistance is definitely going to be a contributing factor. It makes it that much the easier.
We are now
whether or not.
This is one of the points that I made earlier when we were having our exchange. Is we are now in the age of predator drones, which can fire flown from any place on the earth and fire missiles that you won't even hear them coming. How do you think small arms is going to help you against this sort of thing?
Well, if we return back to the United States where it's a live issue, one thing I do know is that there are hundreds of millions of firearms, and it's an altogether different thing to say that you could go in some place where, well, I don't know, there's not a large armed resistance and be effective, and it's quite another thing when it's most people in every city. Because then to prevail, you pretty much have to raise the entire civilization. Moreover, I will point out...
No, not even remotely true.
Really?
I mean, and let's just take a typical example of a dictatorship. I'll use the one that you used. And, Nazi Germany. And I agree with you that there are legitimate lessons to be learned from Nazi Germany, and it is both trite and unhelpful to just say Godwin's law, because there are genuine things that can be gotten out of this. With the Nazis, they did not wipe out the entire population to establish power. The truth is, you only have to wipe out a few % of the people, the people who have ideas, the leaders, and the such like. And once everyone else lives in fear, whether they've got guns or not really doesn't make any difference.
Well, the one useful thing.
In other words, the greatest weapon is controlling the mind. Once you have people scared, that is your mechanism of control.
Yes, and that is precisely one of the reasons that the argument about the Second Amendment is there. It is a doomsday provision saying that if everything else fails and everything's gone to shit and it's all going to go kablooey, it's going to be, well, a horrible, horrible thing on both sides. And it is in part making the government somewhat tenuous about wanting to go into a city where most people are armed and having to fight with them. Fear works in two directions, sir. Moreover, I'll point out that it's useful, like with respect to the gun laws in Germany. If the very people you're interested in oppressing are the ones who are deprived from being able to have firearms, while the rest of the citizens aren't. In particular, I cited to you an example in the United States about former slaves returning to the former Confederate states after the Civil War and how they were routinely, summarily disarmed and promptly executed. Do you remember that part?
Right.
Yes.
So if you actually have irresponsible people in possession of guns, then this is a bad thing, yeah?
Yeah.
Well,
yes,
that's an argument for giving people guns. Why?
Well, the fact that some irresponsible people will have firearms does not preclude responsible people from also having firearms. And one of the curious things about ballistic weaponry is that bullets work in both directions. The trick is, hopefully anyway, the hope is that it will be the case that more responsible people will have firearms than not.
Just pausing there, a couple of things, if I may chip in at this stage. You said hopefully. It is just that, an aspiration, of course. But
what government isn't?
Well, we could argue about that, but that's a separate point. I've got the Second Amendment in front of me now.
Okay.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I mean, I don't know. I struggle to think that I can accept the time in which that was written and the circumstances in which that was written, but do you think they honestly have any significant bearing now?
Well, they do in the respect that the people to whom the rights are codified, for whom they're codified, not, by the way, the Constitution is not a grant of rights, it's just a codification of a pre-existing right, but putting that off to the side, they're important to the people who currently hold the rights and who are unwilling to be deprived of them.
But I mean, it had a historical relevance at the time. It was important at the time. But
and I'm pointing out that, I'm trying to point out, perhaps inartfully, that people exist today in presumably a democracy, and for quite a lot of those people, they consider it to be their right, and they're unwilling to be deprived of it. So it's not only that
a lot of people consider it their right to abuse children. The fact that they assume it to be a right doesn't mean that the law must follow what they think.
And the fact that we have never codified it in law that one has a right to abuse one's own children should indicate that that has not been something that's been understood to be the right of a civilized society. Would you disagree with that, or do you think there's no distinction between things that we don't?
This is sort of bleeding in from the last conversation, which is,
Psychics?
Do you have the right? No, well, sort of. Do you have the right?
I didn't see that
children. Did you see the? Do you have the right to tell children they'll burn in hell forever, or does that actually count as psychological abuse?
Well, I guess to put it in another way, to return it to my learned friend over there, when the First Amendment was written, I can understand the time and the place, but is it really a freedom of speech to be able to say in this day and age something like that? I mean, is the freedom of speech the freedom of speech, or is it not? Does someone have the right to speak the words? Yes, they do. Should someone speak the words? No, they shouldn't.
Well, it's not. That's not you're taking it somewhat literally, and it's not the case, is it? There are certain restrictions that even America puts on the right of freedom of speech.
There are some, yes. There are some restrictions that put on every right.
Yeah.
It's a matter of where do you draw the line.
Yes, this is what I'm asking, and I think that I don't find it particularly persuasive to use an argument that it's written into the Second Amendment when it's clear that the circumstances in which it was written don't seem to be applicable now. That's
I mean, the circumstances where the citizens had overthrown a government that was oppressing them?
Yes.
Absolutely. If you've not overthrown the government by now, you never will.
Well, as it happens to be the case, the trespasses against the citizenry tend to be usually fairly contained and rather small. But I will point out, and there's no reason you should know this because it doesn't make the front page of CNN or anything, but just recently here in Washington State, we had armed citizens go confront their local government and force the government to capitulate and rescind a law that they made illegally. It does, in fact, happen in the United States. That happened in the last couple of months here.
Expand on that, because I'm not familiar with what you're referring to.
In Washington State, it is denied to local governments like city governments, county governments, to make laws that affect the rights of people to carry firearms. Those can only be made by the state legislature. So no local government has the power to legislate on this at all. They can't make any city ordinances that expand or restrict the carrying provisions. A local government decided that they would go around banning firearms in various and sundry places, and during one of their council meetings, a returning from war veteran showed up to have a conversation with the people about how he has his concealed weapons permit, and he wants to know where they get off telling him that he can't walk through the park carrying his concealed weapon when no one's any the wiser about it. One of the council members asked him if he was armed at the moment, and the guy says, yes, I told you I'm always armed, and now is part of always, so I'm right now armed. And the council member wanted the mayor to call the police. The mayor refused. Apparently the police chief would have refused to show up anyway. But anywho, so the councilman excuses himself from the meeting with the mayor's permission because he feels uncomfortable with an armed citizen there to discuss the law, the illegal law. And the following meeting, the entire room was packed with people who were no longer carrying their weapons concealed, and they negotiated with the council to rescind their illegal law, and it was an emergency session rescinded.
But were the guns part of a threat of insurrection or rebellion or revolution?
Well, I can't speak to the intent of the people, but I know that if I'm in a room and I've done something bad, and a team of armed people come in telling me that what I did was bad and I should consider reconsidering, I might be more apt to listen to them than the following week where I was wanting the one person to be escorted out by the police.
Huh. I don't know how much I want to take exactly what you just said, that if I'm in a room full of people who, they have a different opinion than me, and a bunch of people come up and they've all got guns, and this is how we're going to solve our difference of opinion, my thinking is there's a room full of people that need to not have guns for the rest of their lives.
Except it's a little bit different if it's just me sitting in my house, and if it's me sitting in a position of power telling my subjects what they will and won't do as I command. Particularly when it's in contravention to the law. Enacted by and ratified by the very citizens in a democracy who supposedly are the font of the authority of the government.
Does your country have mechanisms for dealing? I know it happens quite often in representative democracies where the representatives, whether it's a legislature or a city council or something, will get together and they'll make a law that is inconsistent with some superseding law or even the Constitution. Is there not a mechanism in your country to be able to challenge that law? One that doesn't involve shooting people. I would
no
say.
One was shot. No one was shot.
Well, what are the guns for?
Well, apparently
you've got guns. You're either using the guns or you're not using guns.
I'll answer your questions in turn. You asked if there is a mechanism. There are several mechanisms. You have the courts. You have elections. But one of the principles in the United States is that it is the right of the citizens to rise up against an oppressive government. In fact, that's what the United States was founded on, the right of the people to rise up against an oppressive government. And it doesn't have to be some large-scale oppressing of everyone.
Sir, I want to clarify, because you're referring to that as a right, the right of the people to rise up. Where does that right come from? Like
the same place the other rights come from.
Where's that?
The willingness of people to fight for them. But you think these are just handed out like candy from someone who just decides?
We may be using. Uh-oh, something just crashed in my computer. Can you guys still hear me? I'm sure I'm still on the Skype call. Okay, good. No, we might be using the word right a little bit differently. My understanding of what rights are is that a right or a claim is something that emerges from an agreement. So if you own a building with apartments and we sign a tenancy agreement where I would go live in one of those suites, you have a claim or a right to, $1,000 per month of my money, and I have a right or a claim to the safe and secure and sole use of that space of the apartment. So those rights in that scenario emerge from the agreement. There are other rights we get through other types of agreements and through statute and things like that. So rights are something that are sort of established by agreement. They don't fall from the skies. So that's why I'm wondering, when you say that people have the right to overthrow the government, on what paper is that predicated?
The same piece of paper that existed before we decided to revolt against England. The one that didn't exist. The rights that are codified in the Constitution, and perhaps you've never read the Federalist Papers, and I would invite you to do so, but the rights that are codified in the Constitution did not originate with the Constitution. They are taken to precede it. The Constitution is merely the delineation of certain rights. In fact, one of the arguments against delineating any of the rights is because, as it was put, sometime in the future, some idiot will come by and say that the rights that exist are only the ones that are written down in the document and no others, whereas they had just fought a war to assert the right of these people to organize their lives in the way that best suited them.
Can I just interject a point here?
Certainly.
How do you know if the government is corrupt and needs to be risen up and fought against?
Well, I don't know. It's like asking, how did you know that slavery was wrong and you needed to really fight that out?
That's not answering the question.
It's posing it to you in exactly the same terms with a particular case. It's not altogether easy.
So, for instance, if you had, say, for instance, the Unabomber, I forget, actually, I might be wrong. That he's fighting an evil and despotic government, and there would be plenty, I'm sure, who would in some way sort of say that, he was. What are the criterion by which you would say, no, he doesn't have the right to do that? That's not covered by the Second Amendment.
That's a good question.
I don't understand. It sounds like you're asking two questions. One about the right of people to revolt, and two about whether Ted Kaczynski bombing faculty members...
No. That was just, if you like, a potential example. What I'm after is...
My example of the Civil War, you could be a guy who sent bombs to teachers and people through the post office. Okay.
But if you had someone...
okay, let me
who was
blowing
up, what's he called? McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh.
Okay, blowing up the government building in Oklahoma. If he had claimed that he was trying to overthrow a corrupt government, how would you decide whether that was the legitimate application of the Second Amendment and that he was perfectly within his rights to do it, or whether he wasn't?
Well, there's a distinction between one guy going in and detonating a bomb and a whole bunch of people, the collective society, agreeing that it's time for a change. And as I've mentioned, I'm going to finish this sentence if it kills both of us. And as I said, the Second Amendment is a doomsday provision. It is not like the first.
Right. At which point, it's almost bloody pointless, because if you're going to have a revolution, the people who have the revolution will decide that it was just in any event. Yeah, I mean, how many people have revolutions and say, no, we were in the wrong to overthrow the government?
Yeah, you've done all the work of pointing out that it gets very messy and that a society is organized in a way that is consistent with what it is the majority of the people are willing to do in order to make it that way. Which was my point, I thought, by making mention of the fact that there was a revolt in this country to throw off the king. The rights that existed, the rights that we claimed, or I should say, the people who fought the war claimed, were the ones they were willing to kill and die to retain and to insist upon.
And as given that the nature of the birth of America, you know, I can see how this was an issue foremost in their minds. But, you know, if you actually now take a wider look at history, all revolutions end up saying, you know, the revolution was justified. Whether it was written in the Constitution beforehand or not is almost a point of irrelevance.
Yeah, and the same thing could be said about slaveholders. They were perfectly justified if you ask them. And you know, the majority of the people decided, well, you know, not so much, and we would like to. No,
this is different, because in one case you've got a revolution that's actually changing the government. The other one is how the government is treating a subsection of its people.
I'm sorry, you don't think
those things are
the government?
The Civil War.
It led
actually,
to
right. Point in question: was the Civil War justified under the Second Amendment? You know, we wanted our right to have slaves, and the evil repressive government was trying to take that away from us. Were they within their rights to try and secede? Now, I know that the result was no. But is this just because
two separate questions? One is, do they have a right to have firearms and to resist a tyrannical government? And two, do they have a right to secede from the Union? No, they didn't have a right to secede from the Union. That's the level of sovereignty.
Isn't that actually throwing off the shackles of an evil and oppressive government?
Yes, it is in the same sense that my walking out of a theater is the same thing as my taking over and owning it. One is saying, I'm going to take my ball and go home, and the other is saying, I now claim this place, and I'm going to control my domain and kick out everyone else.
So they have... I mean, what I'm after here is, say, you know, you had England first and America, and they say, right, don't want to be part of the empire anymore. We're going to, after you say, we're going to take our ball and go home. And now you actually have the same sort of thing splitting in America. Why was that any different?
Well, because the right people won that one. Both of those, actually. Look, you don't get any guarantees. I'm not arguing that this is some utopia and that it's a great system and that everybody's going to live in peace and harmony and justice. The world is a brutal place, which is one of the reasons, incidentally, that people like...
Not in civilized countries and not for the last 200 years.
I'm sorry. No. You cannot say not in civilized country, not for the last 200 years. The Civil War was
150 years. Actually, 200 years is wrong. Yeah, okay.
And moreover, as I asked you in my video, if you are wrong, sir, to whom are we going to turn? You and your cadre of chemists and gamers? And I'm not asking that just to be a dick, though it is partly a dick question. If you are wrong...
And the word is absolutely fucking yes. Right? Wars are won by weaponry. They're not won by people... Yes. The reason that we have Predator drones now that can strike anywhere on the planet,
there's a reason,
because of the
there's a reason that we've been unable to use them to kill enough of the enemy to make them no longer a threat to our soldiers on the ground. Because whether you like it or not, sir, the infantry is still the queen of battle. You can raise a village by dropping ordnance. You can go Dresden on the place. You could do that. But if you want to occupy it, you can't do that with Predator drones and tanks. You have to send in vulnerable people with squishy little bodies in a mountain environment to go building to building to building to secure it. And guess what? Those people in both directions can be shot. So this battle, this vision of battle that you have is alien to me. Unless you want to posit that what you would do is just level the city and kill everyone in it and then just rebuild it, which I suppose is always a possibility. I mean, the United States isn't above it. We did it in Japan. But the one thing, and you've mentioned the American military, and I've tried to point out a couple times, we have more than one American military. I mean, every state retains its own military, and if you look at the numbers, the ones retained by the states match that as the one retained by the federal government.
Can I just quickly pause you there, Integral? It appears as if the person who you're having the main conversation with, Thunderfoot, is taking a call. So please stay with us as I bring in the next call, okay. I won't remove you. You might have comments that you'd like to make in relation to our next caller's points, which I think is going to be a radical change from your point. But as I say, I don't want to remove you.
I appreciate the love, my learned friend.
Oh, stop it. You'll make me blush. Thank goodness I'm in black and white.
I was going to say, a little color on your cheeks? I don't believe it.
Carl, are you with us?
I am indeed. Can you hear me?
Perfectly well. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. As I said to you, I'd like to talk about the levels of religiosity, particularly Catholicism in Poland, where I'm currently living. I'm sure you could probably tell from my accent that I'm actually English, but anyway, I just was listening to the show last time, and I noticed that Thunder was talking about the levels of religiosity in Poland before, and I just wanted to maybe talk to a little bit about why maybe it's so high in Poland compared to some of its neighbours. For example, like he was.
Well, again, you're keen to talk to Thunder. Thunder's busy on the phone.
Oh,
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what we're doing. No, it's all right. I'll keep you in the call, but
okay, sure.
Whilst we're waiting for Thunder to come back, seeing as everything's directed at him at the moment. Hogtie, we were talking before the show started. In fact, we may have talked during the course of the show that the legal system in Canada is very similar to that in the United Kingdom. What's the position with gun control in Canada?
Oh, you know what? We keep our heads down. We don't really talk about this issue much. You know, we're just having this fascinating conversation about the Second Amendment, and I did as you had, and that's to actually open up a browser window and look it up. I do at some point. I would love to hear an explanation of what's meant by the phrase "a well-regulated militia." I can assure you there is no tradition in Canada that would, through constitutional or quasi-constitutional instrument, convey to or recognize the right of people to have guns. It's just simply not present. The notion of ownership of property and stuff and things is represented in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but it doesn't matter anyway, because if you read the Canadian Charter, it has this great expression about that we recognize this whole laundry list of rights, and that we recognize that they all have limits that are reasonable, or limits that would be deemed reasonable by a free and democratic society. So it creates this great, sort of vacuum of, well, what does that mean? But it's good, because then we have the courts and the legislature to help debate those things out. I can tell you that I think as a Canadian, we've come to a very reasonable position. That position being many more guns per capita than the Americans. I always find it funny that the Americans will tell, oh, you're Canadian, you guys don't have, let me tell you what a gun is, because you guys have probably never seen guns. Man, my family, myself, have more guns around here than you know. The thing is, we sort of respond to this notion of the this militia that's going to help protect us against an oppressive government, and say, okay, yeah, I can see that's important, but let's look at the truth of it. What happens when you see guns and out there, and you say, well, a lot of people use them for hunting and for sport, and then like you hear this story, was it last week, the woman, and I could pick any week in the calendar and this would have happened, because it happens somewhere in the States all the time. The woman that had dropped her purse, and the gun in her purse went off and she shot her friend. And when asked about it, she said, oh, I forgot it was in there. My dad gave it to me a couple of years ago, and I just intermittently throw it in my purse. I mean, the reality of gun ownership, both in Canada and the US, is that the more you sort of let people carry them around casually, the more idiocy and foolishness and truly tragic situations take place. So to answer your question more directly, the status of gun ownership in Canada is it's recognized that a lot of people own guns, and we do have an application process that is pretty straightforward, that unless you have a criminal record or you're in a mental institution, you're going to be able to get a permit. But no, you can't put your gun in your coat pocket or in the waistband of your sweatpants. And there are lots of types of guns, assault rifles and whatnot, that you just can't own. And we just find it odd that other countries, notably the U.S., treat the ownership of weaponry, that is specifically, this is to shoot people, as somehow a fundamental right.
Pardon me? You said specifically to shoot people? Do you shoot other things with them?
I shoot lots of stuff. I have not shot any people. I've shoot many other things with guns. Yes. Yes.
So the thing that is specifically designed to shoot people is the thing that you're using not to shoot people, but shoot other things. Okay.
No,
Integral. That's one of the worst points you've made so far. There are many guns that are used for shooting, either game shotguns, for example, and rifles that are used for hunting. They're not all designed to shoot people.
Actually, Integral. What is a wad cutter?
It's a type of bullet.
That does what?
It enters whatever you shoot and does damage to it. I'm not sure what you're driving at here. You're talking.
Well, why would a person use a wad cutter as opposed to a hollow point?
Well, presumably because they would like some penetration.
No. So you really don't have a lot of expertise in what guns are made for, the types of diversity of guns that are out there. I can tell you the wad cutter is a type of bullet that is designed completely for purposes other than shooting people. Now, I mean, to get shot in the face with a wad cutter would probably wreck your day. I'm pretty sure about that. The main feature, wiki wad cutter, there's a sort of a cutting edge.
You asked me the distinction between a hollow point and a wad cutter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for those who don't know ammo other than armor-piercing Teflon-coated hollow points, can someone actually just tell me what the hell a wad cutter is?
I'm working on it. Yeah, you know, the hollow point has a thing so that it's meant to blow and make big holes and stuff. The wad cutter has almost like the blade of a pair of scissors around. It's a very, very sharp blade, so that when it hits a paper target, it makes a perfect hole. If you shoot, say you shoot a target with a hollow point or a rounded bullet, a full metal jacket, it's going to hit the thing and tear the paper. And the way they score it is if even the tear touches the line, you get the lower point on that target. So a wad cutter just goes pop and makes a very neat little hole. So it's a bullet specifically designed for a purpose other than shooting people. It's made for shooting paper. And yet, there's rounds of ammunition that's designed for shooting clay targets. There's all sorts of ammunition and firearms that are designed not as weaponry, but as.
And the curious thing about your statement about wad cutters and paper targets is that wad cutters are one of the more common rounds people use specifically for self-defense, particularly in small caliber weapons.
Why would you propose that is? I agree, wad cutters are very popular ammunition, but why are wad cutters so common in handguns in the States?
Well, I guess you would have to ask someone who carries the ammunition, which I don't.
Oh, I do. I can tell you. The reason is because if I walk down to my local Walmart, can you buy bullets in Walmart? Is that true? I'm Canadian, so I don't know if you can do that. And I
used to be able to.
Yeah.
Oh, they stopped it?
No, you still can.
Actually, it probably goes state by state, if I remember. There are places, certainly Wyoming, I remember you could, but I also remember there were other places where I don't think you could buy ammunition in Walmart.
Those in the chat seem to think you can, but anyway, what's the point?
I'm Canadian. I can buy bullets in my Walmart because Canadians love the guns. No, but if I go into the Walmart and I say, okay, I've got a handgun here and I want to shoot something, what have you got? They're going to try to sell me wad cutters or something for pinging cans off of an old fence. And I say, oh, that's good, that's good. Hey, what do you got that's able to penetrate through a cop's armor? You know, like that's the most type of bullets you find in people's firearms are the most common types of bullets sold, right? And you can't just go into stores and be like, oh, you know, I want to give me something armor piercing. That's why. So don't tell me that there's some reason why they use wad cutters. The reason is because that's the bullet that's available.
Wait. And don't tell me not to tell you there's a reason when you're going to tell me that there's a reason. Either it's going to cut both ways or it isn't. If I can't state a reason, neither can you.
No. What I'm saying is that you're telling me that there's a reason, as if the reason is consistent with what you're trying to convince us of, and I'm telling you, well, if you don't know the reason, then there's no point in telling us there's a reason.
For any person who carries a particular round, you need to ask that particular person why they carry that particular round. All I can tell you is that it's a very common round that's used specifically in self-defense firearms. That is just
guys. Can we keep it off the minutiae?
Yeah. Moreover,
if you don't know why people do it, why are we even arguing about it? I mean, come on. Let's keep it.
I just want to put out the bait and switch. You asked me about the conversation was about firearms, and then you switched to ammunition.
Because the same. I'm just responding to your point that when you somewhat snarkily had pointed out to me when I was saying that there's sort of non-weapon firearms. There are firearms that are clearly weapons that is intended in assault of other people, and then there are firearms that are meant to shoot things because it's fun. Boom, you get to shoot things. So I would call those non-weapon firearms.
The firearms I'm talking about, where you'd use a wad cutter, are the ones that are most commonly used, particularly in homicides. Unlike the firearms, I presume you mean assault rifles and the such like, that are the so-called weapons that are very infrequently used to kill other people. Yeah. In fact, used less often.
I'm responding to DPR Jones's question too about sort of the legal status of it in Canada. We can have a lot of those. The types of firearms that, for example, that I would have possession of are not involved in crimes. And now I'm going to sort of factor in not just the type of firearm, but also the way it's used. So, for example, I have a 105 mil barrel, which is a restricted firearm in Canada, that is in two pieces in two separate locked boxes. And I could take it out to a range and pop and shoot some stuff. And that gun can't be involved in a crime. It's not designed for that purpose, and it is not implemented or in any way stored that it could be used in that purpose. It's not really what we're talking about in the context of the Second Amendment, which is weaponry designed to be able to assist in an insurrection or defense against governmental attack.
So the weapon you just said that can't be used, you're saying that it's not possible to be used? Like you couldn't go shoot someone with it?
Right. With the clarification that I offered, that I'm saying that this is sort of the intent of the legislation, is that I don't throw it on the seat of my pickup truck and drive to the range where it could be stolen. We actually have very, very strict transportation. So, for example, I have in the country, I have amongst the highest rating for the level. It's a restricted and prohibited firearms possession, and so I have pretty high standing in that regard. Lower, obviously, than members of the police force, the military, but higher than pretty much anyone else. And yet I'm not allowed to put one on my hip or throw it on the seat of the pickup truck and drive around. So when I say it's not possible for it to be involved in a crime, I mean, obviously somebody could, steal these boxes and get a cutting torch and break them open and et cetera. Of course it's possible. But
about you, like you could just decide to go off and shoot people with it, couldn't you?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's kind of on the honor system at bottom. Once you get it, it's on the honor system.
Exactly.
Can I just butt in here?
Like everything else in Canada, it's the honor system.
Can I just butt in here though? Help us here, Integral, if you can. The situation in America, presumably some tests are done. I know it may vary from state to state, but some tests are done on the appropriateness of an individual to have any sort of firearm. And I'm presuming also that you have got no objection about that.
No, there are background investigations for like criminal violations, restraining orders, and though the next one's spotty, mental health adjudications. Those are not reported the way they're.
So my point, I suppose, is that in relation to these people, you have no problem in removing their Second Amendment rights. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Convicted felons,
No, right. The mentally unstable, I can see you might have a point, but does someone waive the right to overthrow an oppressive government because they've committed a crime?
Well, do they waive the right to vote because they've committed a crime?
That's again a question for a question.
Yeah, and my point is that anyone can ask us, what if question all you like.
Well, right, but do you think that's right? That if you actually commit a crime, that you waive the right to overthrow an oppressive government?
A person who can't be trusted in times of relative peace to walk around armed because they've demonstrated a willingness to violate certain laws and put other people needlessly in danger and whatnot, forfeits certain rights. That's the entire notion of prisons. Hi, people. You have forfeited some of your freedoms because you can't behave yourselves. Now, if a war breaks out, I don't.
I'm not
excuse
sure.
Me, I will answer your question. If a war breaks out, as you probably well know, people aren't all that picky about who they're willing to work with, who's able to kill their enemy. I point you to U.S. foreign policy in a lot of places. That's causing us some problems right now, as you might have noticed.
Okay.
Well, we did
okay. Let's try another line. Do you think there should be any restrictions on people's right to have weapons to overthrow the government? I mean, if you really want people to have this right, shouldn't they also have access
to nuclear weapons, chemical stockpiles, their own private army, navy, air force? Sure, yeah, why not? I'll grant you all that. I'll say that it's entailed by the Second Amendment.
You're not answering
and I'll do
the
you one
question
better.
again. Why do you think that the right ends with small arms?
I think he was saying that he didn't, but do carry on. You're interrupted, Integral.
I would just say, I will, for the sake of being friendly to you, I'll argue that the Second Amendment protects all of those, up to and include the examples that you've used before.
Since when have you tried to be friendly to somebody? Come on.
Well,
you don't need to use that concession.
I didn't have my regular Thursday. I'm trying, look, haggle here.
All right.
So, say the Second Amendment does protect all of those as a sheer matter of courtesy. And I mean everything from like...
But it doesn't, does it?
Excuse me, can I finish my answer in the same way I let you finish your answers? Thank you very much. So it protects everything from like the little 22 starter pistol all the way up to your own nuclear stockpile. But as a courtesy, being the reasonable people that we Americans are, we said, you know what? We'll forego insisting on having our own nuclear weapons, our own chemical stockpiles, our own private army, navy, and air force. Just leave us the hell alone with our hunting rifles and pistols, if that's all the same to you. But that's not good enough, because now it's, well, you need to get...
I hear a lot of snark, but you're actually fairly skinny on the details. Why do you draw the line? If you want to be able to overthrow the government...
Why do you draw the line to do research at not experimenting on humans?
Can you actually ever just answer a fucking question?
I have to say,
yes, I can.
Integral, come on. Try
no,
a bit harder.
That question is perfectly fair. He's asking, how do you draw the line between...
You're not answering a question.
Okay. How is that not... I'm sorry, I don't want to put it in the form of a question.
Well, no, you were asked why it stops at small firearms, and you turned around and said, why do you stop experimenting on humans? That's not answering the question. Come on, Integral. You're better than that.
Well, I doubt that I am, but it's to point out that for the same reason, medical researchers are capable of realizing it's not right to go experimenting.
Just stick to the point of the Second Amendment. Jesus.
And I will return to that in a heartbeat, little bunny. For the same reason that those people are capable of distinguishing one thing from another thing, so too is it the case that people are capable of distinguishing one other thing from another thing that falls along a continuum. No one is advocating that people should have private cannons or their own nuclear stockpiles. In the same way, when we talk about... No, I said, suppose that the Second Amendment does protect all that. As a matter of courtesy, we will forego all of that to just be left alone with our rifles and handguns. Do you not understand?
Okay, no, I hear snark, but I hear very little in the way of reasons why you think the line should be drawn where it is. Right? If you think that...
okay, I see what you're saying. When I say that it was possible to draw a distinction between one thing and another, you want more of an explanation of the distinction to be drawn between the one thing and the other.
Yes, I think that's...
No.
So he doesn't. Then I don't know what he's saying either, DPR.
When you say that the Second Amendment is about the right to overthrow a tyrannical government,
in part,
right, why do you draw this distinction there? Why do you say the line ends with small arms? What are your reasons? I don't want to know about some other completely unrelated subject. I want to know why you think the line ends with small arms.
That sounds to me like what I just said, that why do I distinguish one thing from the other thing? But then you said, no, it's not.
Right.
Anyway,
What are the reasons? What? Just
yeah,
tell me.
Because there is a distinction between. What is that
distinction?
There is a distinction between a weapon system that is capable of killing one person at a time and one that is capable of killing or removing an entire block.
Oh, what? So, and you wouldn't need.
But hang on a second. I'm struggling to follow you, Integral. And normally, I think that you're fairly coherent, and I'm lost on this one. So, if the right to bear arms is for the reasons given in the Second Amendment, then why is it not acceptable for you to own a tank, anti-missile weapons, etc.? This is what I'm not understanding.
I would hate to return it to you with a question, but I'll point out that you could, as I've tried to point out a couple of times, anyone can play this game with any right you want to talk about. Why should it be the case that you can't go to a black person's house and stand on the front on the public road and burn a cross? Why should it be the case that you can't do this? Why should it be the case that you can do this?
No, I think there's a difference, though. Because if you are saying that the right to bear arms comes from this Second Amendment, then...
No, I did not say it comes from that. I specifically said it does. The right pre-exists it. The Second Amendment is the codification of that pre-existing right. I have not said that the right comes from the Second Amendment. In fact, I took pains to point out a war was fought specifically for these kinds of things. The Constitution just codifies the rights that the people claim for themselves, a part of which is responsibility, the right to be a responsible, self-governing people. And the fact that there's a distinction between a weapon system that's capable of killing one person at a time and one that, every time you detonate it, will kill God knows how many people.
We covered this. If you wanted to overthrow a tyrannical government, you would need such weapons, correct?
But the private individual doesn't have such weapons, but the state militias do. I do remember pointing out to you specifically that there's not one military in the United States. Every state retains its own military.
Okay.
There are state militias.
I'm going to try, if I can, I'm going to try and draw this to a close, because we've got Carl who's been waiting very patiently, and I know, Thunder, you're in the firing line at the moment because he wanted to talk specifically to you about this issue. Integral, would you be happy to stick with us as long as
Sure.
you address the issue and don't return to guns? We'll have to leave that one for this show, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
You know me, a gang full of guys, I'm happy to play with you.
I'm sure you've got attitudes and opinions on everything. Kyle, I apologize for keeping you waiting, but you did want to, I think, address your question specifically to Thunder. Kyle.
Well, not specifically to Thunder, but it just in relation to something he said last week, which is he was talking about the percentage of religiosity in Poland, especially compared to some of the other countries. It was briefly, but you did. And I wanted to maybe try and shine a light onto why it may be so much higher in Poland than, say, for example, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, for example. And I think it's to do with the huge history that the Catholic Church has had with the issue of Polish nationality in the last 200 years or so, because in addition to the rule of communism after the Second World War, where, of course, the communists did try and wipe out Catholicism, and the Catholic Church was particularly strong at keeping up with the Polish identity. It also, you have to even go back further to the 1800s, where Poland wasn't a nation at all. And a large part of it was ruled by then Russia, which tried their very hardest to wipe out Poland as a nationality, but tried to wipe out the Polish language, make everybody Russian, forget Polish history, everything. And the one thing that kind of stuck with them the entire time and kept with the Polish nationality was the Catholic Church, in particular, towards the end of Poland, particularly integral to Poland's independence.
That wasn't true of Czechoslovakia, and they're just over the border. I mean, I've never understood it myself, but.
May I say that I'm not an expert on the history of those two countries, but I know that Czechoslovakia would have been part of, I believe, Austria, at least in the 19th century. I don't know how much it had an influence.
I think it's come and gone with Germany as well.
Yeah. Sorry, were you waiting for me to speak?
No, yeah. Keep going.
In particular, like John Paul II, when he was Pope, was one of the big three to alleviate Poland from its communist rules during the late 80s, and I think there may have been certainly I've heard the issue that because of the Catholic Church's support for Poland during all this time, it may have a particularly popular support, and that's where everybody could go and effectively be Polish away from their rulers, effectively. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I mean, I've always been sort of fascinated by, how societies change their identity over time. And how some things stick in some places and how they don't in others. Like why did religiosity stick so much better with Italy? I mean, I suppose, it's the heart of Catholicism and whatever. But sort of vanish away. I mean, I guess the French Revolution, that's a fairly simple one. Yeah, but why did religion bleed away so... it bled away in a trickle from England, right, DPR, to the point where now the Queen is technically head of the Church of England, but in practice, England is a far less religious country than America, which ironically is, it's more in line with France. It's a secular government.
Her title is Defender of the Faith. But that's very exclusive as to which faith. Her son, who may become king one day, who knows, wants to change that to become the Defender of the Faiths, because he thinks the world's a better place with more faiths.
I mean, the whole thing is such a farce, though. I mean, when you look at the history, the Church of England was basically because Henry VIII wanted to marry another woman. And so the Catholic Church wouldn't give him a divorce, so he set up his own church, which then became the Church of England, got his divorce. Did he execute his wife? I forget. Good way to start a church, anyway. It's just the most baffling thing ever that, America, which started off essentially as all the religious exiles, ends up with a secular government and a deeply religious country. Well, if you like, the population that it's split from ends up with a technically religious queen and an almost faithless populace. It's just interesting the way these things bleed around.
Well, I'll firstly say I think that the first wife survived, and ironically, that was sure we all know it was the second wife, Henry VIII, that was executed, but that's a moot point, really. I'm sorry, I've lost what I was going to say. Okay, yeah. I was about to say Poland actually is, despite its high Catholicism, is actually also a secular country. It has separation of church and state and everything.
Whereas Germany, if I remember rightly, I know they got some really weird thing that they actually, all the shops close in Germany on Sundays, which they don't do in England. It used to be like that in England, but we got rid of that.
I think there is also a tax that goes to the church in Germany.
That's quite right. I remember now. I was in Germany not so long ago, and yeah, you're quite right. There's government money goes to funding religion. They have enough power still to close all of the shops on Sunday. Yeah.
But let's just go back to the Vatican, if I may, because this is something I was going to bring up on a previous show, and I completely forgot about it. I'm trying to get the best ones I can find. Is there anyone here that follows the Pope on Twitter? No.
Religiously, I follow it religiously. Never,
I recommend that you don't bother.
Go by that.
I mean, I have to say that I don't think that his tweets are composed by him. I don't think he sort of like comes back from the balcony on a Sunday and says, "Oh, like let's get on the laptop and start getting some twits out." But I have to say that they are the most.
What does the Pope do? What do you get?
I'm going to read them out for you.
Sure.
His
okay.
last few ones, and my point is that they're just so benign, pathetic. It's well, I don't know. Part of it is sort of like that bizarre sort of enjoyment of following something that's just so bizarre. It's like watching Jason Byrne's videos, I think. It's that same sort of like mentality. This was posted on the 10th of May by Pope Francis. The Holy Spirit helps us to view others with fresh eyes, seeing them always as brothers and sisters in Jesus, to be respected and loved.
That's not 88 characters. Or whatever it is. That's really a tweet from the Pope?
Yep. More recent ones have included... Sorry.
You want me to read to you the tweets the Pope sends me?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. You might have a private...
He thinks I'm 13.
Here's another one before you move on. This was the 12th of May. Let us pray for many Christians in the world who still suffer persecution and violence. May God grant them the courage of fidelity.
Well, fidelity doesn't protect you. I don't know what will.
I was about to say...
I thought we weren't going to talk about protection anymore, Second Amendment and all that.
I was about to say that as long as he doesn't talk about may choir boys rain down fragrantly from heaven on you.
The following day, on the 13th of May, he
wants to talk about protection.
He tweeted,
if he wants to protect
stop it, Integral.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The following day, he tweeted this in the form of a question. Am I faithful to Christ in my daily life? Am I able to show, in inverted commas, my faith with respect, but also with courage? I mean, this is more vacuous than you get inside a what do you call it, a cookie or something. I've got a senior moment.
I've got I think another fairly decent crossover. With what you were saying, Integral. So how's this for a tweet to the Pope? Dear Pope, I am morally distraught. Which is the morally better decision for what to use for protection against the priest? A condom or a handgun?
Clearly, it had to be the handgun, because that's what you want to give minors, not condoms. Duh. Condoms are immoral.
Why have I got so many messages in my... I don't follow... Oh, here's another one. This was 2 days later. 2013 edition of the World Health Statistics. Definitive source of data on health. Oh, no! Sorry, that was the World Health Organization. Oh, dear, I'm losing the plot. This was his on the 15th of May. It is God who gives life. Let us respect and love human life, especially vulnerable life in a mother's womb. I don't know what point I'm trying to make here. It's just, it's just boring. But I guess people hang on his every word and every tweet. What was his 16th of May? We cannot be part-time Christians. We should seek to live our faith at every moment of the day. There we go.
How many followers on Twitter does he have?
A few 100,000, I think. How do I find out?
Just click his name and pull it up. I mean, Richard Dawkins has like 700,000.
He's got 2.5 million followers.
Okay, so he's beating Richard, is what you're saying.
I think that's also
he's beating
part
Dick.
of the reason why the tweets are so. That's part of the reason why the tweets are so benign. This has been, to my estimation, since about the 60s, part of the reason for the Catholic Church's survival I heard a phrase a while ago about the internet being religion, place go to die. I don't remember I heard that. But anyway, the Catholic Church seems to be weathering the storm. And I think part of it is they're very innocuous. They're very benign. You notice they don't get into the silly, that evolution is a conspiracy of these scientists and whatnot. They kind of stay off the nonsense. Like, they do get into some trouble over the condom thing and HIV and whatnot. But for the most part, they kind of stick to their mainstream and off they go.
Catholic Church is dying everywhere. And it's mostly the priest, the pedophile priest is what really killed them off, to the point where a few years back there were actually protests against the Catholic Church in Italy, which is basically unheard of. It's
the homeland,
yeah. This is the wallpaper. It's part of their culture, and to actually have that, people openly criticizing the Catholic Church was a real change in the weather there. And likewise, we had a load of this in England, and certainly there's been a load of it in America, to the point where I'd have to check the details, but there was talk of the Catholic Church going bankrupt in America because of all these lawsuits. Now, you're right, they sort of stay off the batshit crazy radar in some places, but in others they're all over it.
And I have to take issue with the statement you made, Thunder. On the whole, it's right. The Catholic Church is in decline, except in one place, and that's Africa.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether they were
and they're actually, the position has got so worse, so bad in many European countries that they are actually importing priests from Africa to take over in Europe, because there aren't enough priests, Catholic priests, in Europe to fill the positions. Church figures are on the decline. The congregation figures are on the decline throughout Europe.
Can I just butt in?
But in Africa, and I'm sorry, you can in a second, but I refuse to believe that the Catholic Church does not still spread a poisonous message, because in Africa it still has, and in fact throughout the world, it still has the same policies that it's always had in relation to homosexuality and condoms. And that of itself is enough to condemn them. I'm sorry, Carl, do go on.
I was more, excuse me, I was more going to kind of back up what you were saying, DPR, that even in Poland, which is kind of seen as kind of the last stronghold of Catholicism in Europe, some people that the congregation has declined from about 60% of the population to 40% of the population in the last 20 years since communism ended. And generally, polls show that generally Polish people are becoming less socially conservative. They're less bothered about the ideas of homosexuality, abortion, etc., etc.
But also, I mean, at its heart, Catholicism has things like the communion, which are the only reason that they're not seen as off-the-wall batshit crazy is because they've been so widely accepted. The idea that you say the magical incantations and the cracker genuinely turns into the body of Christ and the wine genuinely turns into the blood of Christ, and this is not flowery speech. This is legitimately what happens, and that's part of the Catholic dogma. And on top of that, when they first tried to export it to all of these, how shall we say, savages in the New World, they thought that Christians were cannibals, because they actually metamorphize these crackers and blood, crackers and wine into blood and flesh, and then eat it, which is just, this is just batshit crazy. Not
to change the subject, but with the Anglican, when they do communion, is it literal for them as well, or is it completely different? Or does anybody not know?
No, I think with the Anglicans, this is very much a symbolic and metaphorically type thing.
Okay, because I know it's being a hobby.
The punch up with the Anglicans, I think, came with the acceptance of women as priests, and the other one was homosexual priests, both of which, with the African chapters, if you like, they were vigorously against all of this, and seeing as those by numbers are sort of some huge fraction of the Anglicans, that was their big point of contention, I think.
Well, I know that we're approaching the end of the show, and I'm going to throw this one open as a sort of like last topic, and I'm going to go to hogtie first, if I may. Will religion ever be removed from the face of the earth?
Yeah, I asked a friend of mine that question a few years ago. We were ranting about some particular topic, and I said, you know what, I think we're in the last generation of this nonsense. And he said something to me. He says, for all of the same reasons why religions must go, that's why religion will stay. And it struck me as profound. I actually never knew what he meant. I don't know. I think the reasons that religion's entrenched are still here. They still persist. And I don't think this is the generation that we're going to see. And we're talking about two different phenomenons too, right? This organized religion, like Catholic Church, like these juggernaut of culturally tied organizations. And then there's just the individually held nonsense thinking. I don't think this is the generation to see those things disappear. The best we can hope for is to root as much of it as we can out of our governments.
Integral.
Will it ever be eliminated? No, I don't think it. I think it's always going to be around in some form or other. The hope is, at least on my part, that it'll just be banal everywhere you find it. But history is not exactly painting a rosy picture for me of the future. So,
I would disagree. Happy and safe civilizations seem to be the kiss of death for religion. I mean,
the United States. Just pointing that out.
Yeah, but even America is going that way. If I were to, we were talking earlier about how societies, their culture changes over time. You know, how plastic their culture is. Certainly, there are aspects of religion that can make it more difficult to change. Which is this is one of the reasons I think that Islam is actually fairly hard compared to things like Christianity. Christianity can bleed out of a culture relatively smoothly. With Islam, you get all these, they seem trivial, but the fact that you're meant to get down and pray to Allah 5 times a day, and this makes it far more difficult to not do it anymore. It becomes far more visible if you're not doing this sort of thing. And it also depends on what your culture is to essentially treating heretics or apostates. You know, if there is a large social price to being apostates, then this will decrease the rate that the religiosity can bleed out of society.
Well, if I might, I think what you're describing there is just the virulence of the strain. I thought we were talking about the eradication of the virus.
Right.
I don't see going. I mean,
right.
I will grant you that it does just happen in successful societies that the religiosity goes down, but I just don't think it's going to vanish. I mean, if you think about it, you get the New Age, mystical, kind of spiritual, there's a God kind of thing. I mean, those people are always going to be around, I think.
Yeah,
I have to say that I totally agree with Integral, and whenever I'm asked about this, I always refer back to Andy Thompson's book about why we believe in God or gods, and it seems to me that a propensity to believe in supernatural entities is ingrained in us. It's part of our evolutionary background, so I don't think that we're ever going to get rid of individuals' supernatural beliefs. That would be a nonsense. I think that there is some hope to diminish the power of organized religions such as the Catholic Church. Let's go to Kyle. Okay, Thunder, and then we'll go to Kyle. Yeah, sure.
This is the thing. You got to look at why do people engage in activity like religion? It takes time, and they get something out of it. And well, what do you get out of it? You get the feeling of security that there is something big and powerful, and they're on your side and they're looking after you. Arguably delusional, yes, but a comforting thought. You're right. There are always going to be people for whom that will always be an attraction. However, if you've got a safe, stable, and secure society, the need for that sort of thing is diminished. And why, in an increasingly busier civilization, where there are more calls on your time, this raises the bar for why should I spend my time now, 1/7 of my time, whatever, on Sunday, going to church when I can be doing something fun with my life.
I said it to Kyle, but if my
this
reading
is the thing.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, you destabilize civilization, or a society, and religion will come back, I think, very quickly.
Kyle.
In regard to this particular question, I'm not sure I have all that much more to add than anybody else has already said. I'd be in line to more agree with VPR and Integral on this issue. I think perhaps we're probably not going to get rid of religion altogether, but certainly in more safer societies, particularly in Western countries, religion does seem to be on the decline, and particularly non-religious individuals are far more accepted in these places. It seems even as I said, I am an atheist in Poland. I've been here for almost a year now, and while I don't go out and flaunt my atheism to everyone, I don't hide it either. I've not had any real issues with this. Granted, I've not met a Catholic priest yet, but I happen to agree more or less with what everybody's been saying.
Just very quickly, a comment from the chat, which is absolutely hilarious if true. There is Pink Unicorn, who apparently lives in Germany, and says that in Germany it costs you 30 euros, give or take, I don't know, $50 or something to quit the church. Now that's a real barrier to exit,
A hog tie.
Oh, do I have a...
Sorry, I just...
Go ahead, yeah.
Obviously, I'm incredibly bad at it. And my reading of your body language gave me the impression that you had something to add.
You're right. You're always very quick about that. I'm impressed. You should do these shows every day. Yeah, I think in terms of the death of religion and the death of nonsense thinking, it's interesting to look at the kind of religious compression effect we're seeing in the States now. So if you take a look, if you were just to graph like yes or no, are you religious or not religious? Do you believe in Christ? No, you don't believe. That graph is wiggling down a little bit more every year. But you're getting to see sort of a compression, and the ones that are left, it's like this analogy of killing off the bacteria with an antibiotic. You tend to get the more susceptible, weaker ones, and then you leave the bacteria that are very good at not falling susceptible to whatever countermeasure you're using. And you take a look at what's going on in the States. You're getting fewer and fewer mainstream or midstream moderate Christians and getting more Nephilim-free shock of God type of Christians. And if you wonder what the next generation is doing, take a look at the thaw. Everyone's seen this video? So now that we've convinced these kids, these high school kids, that you're under attack, it now becomes part of a culture war. Those kids...
Can I pause you? I've not seen the video. Can you give us a...
I haven't heard of it either.
Yeah, can you tell us...
Okay, so by way of brief summary, and I say you can just search YouTube for the thaw, and you'll have to sift through a whole bunch of response videos to it. But it's very high production values. There's no way these kids put this thing together themselves. But they're high school kids that are saying all the crap. What's his Rick? The guy who did the Strong video, say that crap about, oh, you can't pray in school, and they're trying to make Christianity illegal, and just all these things about how there's all these attacks on Christianity. But they say Christianity is being frozen out in the U.S., and you watch, the thaw is coming. and it's got this graphic of an American flag with a block of ice sitting on top of it. And over the time through the video, the block of ice starts to descend away, leaving a cross. And yeah, these kids.
And a wet American flag and a cross that falls over. I mean, it's just one of the most poorly thought out metaphors ever. You know, what? If you wanted to get the American flag wet, why not just put it in the sink or something? You know, it's like, but yeah, this is sort of archetypal. You know what I was saying. If you want people to be religious, make them feel insecure, make them feel like they're in a threatened environment, make them feel that people are out to get them.
Yeah, it's very galvanizing for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I shouldn't say galvanizing. Doesn't galvanizing just mean to put sort of a shiny coat on something? I think we should say vulcanizing when we talk about increasing strength.
No, because that talks about rubber. And we know rubber's
I thought he was talking about Romulus and Remus. But,
Gentlemen, this is a family show.
That's how families are made, sir, not by using rubbers.
Final words, anyone, if they would like, before I wrap things up.
Is that another rubber comment?
Okay, you've had your final word.
It was good talking to all of you, even the bunny.
Yeah. Stick with us. We'll carry on the chat after we wrap things up. But if no one's got anything else to say, can I give a huge thank you to Hogtie, who, as I say, sort of like stood in at the last moment because Concordance wasn't able to be with us, and Aaron Ra, I think at this very moment, is on stage somewhere in Canada. So thank you very much, and I think
let me just say one last thing. I'm not actually that opposed to people owning guns. It's just I think that the justification of the Second Amendment. That one is one that I've never found terribly convincing. But I just wanted to say where I stand. You know.
I just wanted to say I'm not that much in favor of it.
Well, for my last word, can I say thank you? This was a lot of fun. The pre-show was fun. It's a really entertaining time. I'm glad to be sort of down lower midway on your call list there, DPR.
Not at all. I only know that's unfair, Hogtie. I won't have that. I had an opportunity for the first time speaking with you on a show yesterday, and I was so impressed. As I say, I got you on the show today. I think that's impressive. I can spot talent. Shush! I'm paying someone a compliment, which I don't do that often. I'd like to pay a compliment to you as well, Integral, but I can't think of one. So
thank you.
No,
and if Aaron is in Canada, he should swing by my house. It's not a big country. He's probably nearby.
He's from Texas. He doesn't know how to say house.
He did tell me where he was, but I can't remember. Anyway, I've got thank you.
Just say what you normally say.
He's in Kamloops.
Gentlemen, we can carry on the conversation as soon as I end the show with these thank yous. Firstly, to Tony, who yet again has brought the show to you in wonderful glory and Technicolor and whatever, except for me, who is in black and white. Thank you very much indeed, Tony. Thank you also to Live Life, who stood in at the last moment on the previous show. So thank you as well to Live Life. Just to remind you, these videos or this show will be posted on YouTube. May take me a little bit longer this week. I've got a very busy week ahead of me, but it will be on our YouTube channel, which of course you'll find under the name Magic Sandwich Show. You can also find out about everything that's going on with the Magic Sandwich Show by visiting the website www.magicsandwichshow.com, where you get information, amongst other things, about future shows. You'll also get information about the charity event that will be running over the weekend of the 14th and 15th of September of this year in support of Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. And you can also follow us on Twitter at the DPR Jones. Of course, all these links will be included in the YouTube video description box. But also, if you want to listen to the entire show on an MP3 file, those are also available, and you get links to those by, again, going to the website, www.magicsandwichshow.com. Can I thank again everyone that's been here to watch, and all those that have called in and taken part, in particular, Hogtie. Thank you very much. Your contribution has been great, and I hope to see you on a future show. On that note, thank you very much, Tony, for doing the show. We'll bring it at an end, but do stay on the call and we can carry on a discussion afterwards. Tony, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Toodles! Did that make it on the air?
Probably.